Hello all, today we have with us Dr. Lekha Chakraborty, the professor at National Institute of Public Finance and Policy. And to say more about her, we have a lot of things, as she is an economist, famous Indian economist, having a lot of international acclaim and a lot of academic as well as non-academic achievements. So we are so delighted to have you with us, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me.
Ma'am, she's also a research affiliate at Levy Economics Institute of Bard College, New York. Her areas of interest are macroeconomics of public finance, fiscal federalism, extractive sector economics, financing human development and gender budgeting. She is also the author of Fiscal Consolidation, Budget Deficits and Macroeconomy by Sage Publications. And she is also the co-author of the book Social Sector in Decentralized Economy, India in the Era of Globalization, published by Cambridge University Press. And she has also worked for IMF, World Bank, the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific, the UNDP, the UN Women, and the Commonwealth Secretariat on short stints. Her work experience on macro fiscal policy and human development spans across 8 countries: Sweden, Canada, Morocco, the Philippines, South Africa, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, and Mexico, and more frequently in Asia Pacific region. She was twice an awardee of Shastri Indo-Canada program from Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Government of Canada, and she was a visiting professor at American University, Uppsala University, Carleton University, and the University of Utah, US. And she has papers in national and international journals. And she is a columnist in the Indian Express, the Hindu, the Financial Express, Business Line, Business Standard, The Wire, Hindustan Times, and Scroll, and featured in CNBC, ANI, DD News, Air World Air Service, and Rajya Sabha too.
Above all, she is our alumni of our Department of Economics of the batch 1990 to 93. So, once again, welcome you to this wonderful session. We are hoping for a nice interaction with you, ma'am.
Sure.
So, being an Ivanian, what do you feel when you come to this campus, or what are the wonderful moments that you have in this campus?
Oh, thank you. That question makes me nostalgic. It's homecoming for me. It's like I studied here, as Ashish mentioned, I studied here, passed out in 1993. So after that, I was invited to deliver lectures. So it's like a homecoming for me. And I can see a lot of very positive changes here in terms of infrastructure, and the campus is so beautiful. And one thing which is unchanged is the relationship between the faculty members and students, and the way you are together. That's the way we lived long back. So that kind of bonding between the teacher and students, that's very crucial. And you asked me to say my the wonderful memories. It's not academic moments, it's a non-academic moments where you have a lot of competition, the campus festival. So I was, very active in campus festivals. So those memories, I danced, I participated in versification competition. Then, I participate in theatre, and the way teachers, make you ready, you have to, win that, house competition. So blue house, green house. Yeah. So after that, you have to go and represent your college, and you have to compete with the other colleges, then state level. So those experiences about the college youth festivals, that's very fresh in my mind. And that's it, yeah.
Then how about the economics department?
Oh, wonderful. After a glorious failure in this joint entrance exam, so I was a student, I did maths, science, but I failed. I didn't get through this, entrance exams, because I think we don't know what children need at that age. So we just go by that way, like go ahead with becoming doctors or engineers. So, but I was little academic in nature. But for competitive exams, you need to grind. You need to work out. But if I, in retrospect, look at myself, you can find me in a library in a corner reading books. I had a big like Jula, that Sanji and all I had. So I was little weird, an academic type, but nobody told me that this is academics, that you're going deep into a book or you're reading in library, you're not grinding, you're not working out your, that kind of practicals for, the multiple choice questions. You need to be ready for, but I was not getting a flair for writing the competitive exams. So, but that time, nobody was there to tell me. After all those episodes in Women's College, that was my 2 years after my school, then I joined here in the economics department. Thomas Jot sir was our teacher. That was my first class. He was teaching us microeconomics, and he was also a student of CDS, which is affiliated to JNU. So it's not only microeconomics he taught, he was open to the ideas of students, like the way Abhinaj sir and Liji ma'am, they do a lot of extracurricular things for you, like IAS club, you have then elocution club, you come up with ad hoc, there are many clubs here in which students participate. So like that, he used to, encourage us to come up and talk about this subject. So it's not only the textbook kind of economics, but what's happening in the country. Because that time in 1990, if you remember, our country was opening up. Till then it was an autarky. So it's a new thrill, that fruits of liberalization, globalization. So that was a time in which, I entered into the field of economics, and it was very interesting what was happening to the country. Then that inquisitiveness about the new subject, and my teachers and wonderful friends. So it was like that.
So yeah, ma'am, so you got into economics at a period when the economics was somewhat changing.
Absolutely.
Indian
from a
economy.
microeconomic to a macroeconomic view.
Absolutely.
And what made you really attracted to economics as a subject, as a career of your study, what area of your study? What made you attracted to economics?
Yeah, economics it's like the business of life. So I read a bit of Affluent Society by Galbraith or John Robinson's economic philosophy. So I was unable to connect to what is there in these books, but certain things I still remember. In the basic concept of utility you study. So this utilitarianism, we always think that it is kind of a very selfish utilitarian approach, but the way John Robinson it's a small book, students should read that book. In the economic philosophy, it's written that what goes around comes around. So that's the way she begins her work, and the way she defined utility is she says that it's a metaphysical concept. So like any other metaphysical concept, the moment you try to pin it down or pen it down, it just becomes philosophy. So I was trying to connect what she was telling. So it's not like, definitional economics. It's not like we are learning what is DMU, what is utility in definitions, but the way, the economists speak about in the different books, I started reading. But that put me in trouble also in PG. My teachers still remember that I couldn't complete my syllabus because, one portion, one section, I'm going in detail, reading even the basic books which is in the reference list. But for the exam, if I do that and go, I may even fail because there are a lot of other things to, complete. So that teachers, Uma ma'am, she met me recently for a UN meeting, and she told that, Lekha, the way you put me into that kind of a tension, because you're going deep and deep, that was good. But overall, you need to complete your syllabus. So, the kind of tension she had. So these are my memories and treasure, valuable moments. Yeah.
Ma'am, you also specialized in the area of gender budgeting. So, how does gender budgeting as a fiscal innovation helps in fostering socio-political growth of women in society? And how much do you think the recent Kerala budget have moved towards this gender-sensitive budgeting?
Very good question. Two parts to your question. Let me take the first part about the gender budgeting. Globally, we believe that the ultimate objective of economic policy is economic growth. So everything in terms of GDP. Then it was a revolution that we need to go beyond growth because something else is beyond. And that time, There was no MDGs or SDGs like Sustainable Development Goals or Millennium Development Goals. So prior to that, I was given this project on gender budgeting. So that time nobody could connect to it, and that was my first job in National Institute of Public Finance and Policy. That's an autonomous institute of Ministry of Finance. So I joined in this pioneering nature of the project, but so far that time nobody has spoken about gender in public finance or gender in budget. So it was a new thing. So some people ridicule, what exactly is happening. Gender is not the cup of tea of a finance minister. What exactly is happening in the corridors of a public finance institute? So those kind of confusions were there, but the top was open. My director was open. He was taking up the innovative projects. So then, when I started working, as a woman, I didn't face any challenges, different from my colleagues, men, because we are facing the challenges similarly. But the topic given to me, gender budgeting, which is very pioneering nature, so that recognition was my challenge. So I'm doing and I'm getting confused. Am I contributing enough? Just like the way my colleagues contribute to the taxation policy of our country, intergovernmental fiscal mechanisms, expenditure design, but gender. So am I contributing enough? So those confusions were there. But when the project unfolded, as you mentioned, it became a fiscal innovation. It was a new kind of experiment, and like any innovation that passed through many stages. The first was like the knowledge building, what exactly the country has to do in terms of gender budgeting, because that model, any other country we cannot emulate. It has to be specific to our country, because in our country, discrimination starts even before birth.
Yes.
So those kind of issues, other countries may not face. So these kind of issues, need to be addressed, and how we have to integrate into the budgetary concerns. So those challenges were different. The next phase was institution building, like the research. We do research, but that needs to be culminated into a public policy prescription. So that requires institutions, the role of institutions. So then I worked with the Ministry of Finance. I was lucky with the Chief Economic Advisor, and we were designing about the institutional structure and analytical matrices to convert this policy research to policy prescription, a public policy. So it was like a blank paper in front of you. Challenges were there, confusions were there, but translating it into a policy making, that was a great moment for me. That third was capacity building, like UN agencies and all, they come and do the capacity building at the center and the state level. And now we are into the fourth stage, that is accountability, because gender budgeting is a tool of accountability. So once it is transparent how much country is spending on women, now there is an accountability issue. So these two, the transparency and accountability issues were very important. Now for the Kerala experiment, Kerala was smart, because that big bang decentralization revolution happened in Kerala in 1995. And Thomas Isaac and then Planning Board Vice Chairman I.S. Gulati, they were like pioneers of that big bang fiscal decentralization. So as a part of that fiscal decentralization process, they integrated gender budgeting. They didn't call exclusively as gender budgeting, but they visualized certain component for women to be within that fiscal decentralization framework. So we started from the third year. And Duflo, the Nobel winning that,
yes,
Esther
Duflo.
Absolutely. Her research shows that feminization of governance at the local level, that helps in translating, public expenditure decisions, incorporating women's preferences. So that 33 plus and all, it was a beautiful decision. And those spaces, the feminization of governance with 33% and above reservation for women in governance, along with this gender budgeting experiment, that became a beautiful experiment, especially in the context of Kerala. So that makes us a little different from other states of India.
I'm looking at this growth, this trajectory of growth. How long would you think Kerala or our country will reach our goal of gender sensitive budgeting? How long will it take?
Oh, that's a very tough question, It has to be, by birth, the gender justice, but our country, it's very patriarchal. And in Scandinavian countries, the concept of autonomous individual is there. And the kind of public policy revolution that happened in the Northern Europe, by incorporating that concept of autonomous individual in the public policy narrative. That's not there in India, or for that matter, any emerging world. That means, the fundamental independence between each other, that's very crucial for living a life of dignity, and the real love and care that happens when you're fundamentally independent of each other. And in the Northern Europe, that kind of public policy revelation happened, and that was incorporated into the public policy. But unless we get that kind of a revolution, then it is very tough to catalyze the process. Second, in many Pacific islands, even in Australia, the status of women's office is at the highest policy making body. It's not a sectoral issue. That's a priority. So unless we get that priority of status of women, the security, safety, the capability deprivation at the highest policy making level, Ministry of Finance, PMO, when they started talking about it and embrace it, then we can catalyze the process. Otherwise, if you ask me, there is a delta change. It means that delta is rate of change is there, but how long? We have to wait and see. But over the years, intertemporally, if I look at maternal mortality rate has come down. It's not a medical or technological revolution. That requires somebody to attend a mom. She should not bleed, or hemorrhage should not happen. That kind of thing doesn't require a revolution. It's a kind of a public policy vision. So things are happening, but miles to go. So I'm unable to do a trajectory for you, Ashish, but it will take time. Yes.
Of course, man. So in the Hindu, dated 6 June 2022, you emphasized why India needs a fiscal council, especially for Indian
you read
economy.
that. Okay.
Yeah. Ma'am, how crucial are these fiscal councils in their role as institutional solution to strengthen public finance, especially in this post-COVID-19 world? And what do you think about this, the relevance of fiscal council in this Indian scenario?
Wonderful. Fiscal councils, that question relates to the budget credibility, because there is a tendency to announce many things in the budget. But when you look at the hard numbers after 1 year, that our budget is floated like first the budget estimates, then after 1 year the revised estimates, then actuals, that. So there is a significant deviation between what is announced in the budget and in the revised estimates and actuals. So you are answerable. Like without any proper backup, you are just announcing things. Or why there is a fiscal forecasting error, we are answerable. And the source of the forecasting error, it can be dichotomized. One can be random, like energy price volatility or a war, or anything can happen and it affects our fiscal arithmetic. But sometimes, the policy makers, the modeling, the assumptions, there is a bias over there. So then, if the bias, you can technically analyze the fiscal marksmanship. So a marksmanship is perfect when there is no deviation between what is announced in the budget and what is actual. But if there is deviation, you need to ask the question whether it is random or whether it is a bias of the policymaker. If it is the bias of the policymaker, you have to correct your tax projections model. Why intergovernmental fiscal transfers, there are fiscal forecasting errors. Why there is an error in the capital spending? Maybe because we have a fiscal rule in our country. Like that 3% of GDP is the deficit. So in a way, we over-adjusted to that 3% of GDP, the fiscal deficit. How we over-adjusted? If the taxes are not buoyant, we learn to compress our expenditure. But expenditure compression affects growth recovery process. If you curtail the spending, it affects financing human development. So if the taxes are not buoyant, in the time of revenue uncertainties like COVID and the geopolitical, risk and uncertainties, revenue stability cannot be the base for expenditure decisions. So that time, you need to own the narrative. Deficit is good for a moment, but that is political. Yeah.
So what do you think about the post-COVID recovery? Does India completely recovered from the evil exercise of this COVID-induced lockdowns or not?
Yeah, we haven't. Because the narrative that there is a U-shaped recovery based on the high-frequency data, if you look at it meticulously, that was an uneven growth recovery. Because the predominant narrative of the COVID pandemic packages was credit infusion. liquidity infusion in the system by the heavy lifting was done by the RBI, but access to the credit was very uneven. And using the tools like interest rate, it's not one-to-one, like you keep your interest rate lower and growth recovery can happen magically. So that didn't happen. So then we started questioning the models behind this economic growth in the time of pandemic. And Geeta Gopinath's one beautiful work is there, Cyclist Trend. And in that work, she explained that in the context of emerging economies, the business cycles may not be operating. We cannot date it like a clear, upturn and downturn. We cannot date business cycles. When the business cycles are not prominent in the context of an emerging country like India, then fiscal policy and monetary policy, they acting as a counter-cyclical policy tool. So that's not working because it's not about cyclicality. Means if you're not getting the prior pandemic growth path, if there is a dip in the growth path, that drop is not a temporary deviation, it is a permanent scar. So once you understand that the drop in the GDP is a permanent scar, you need to work with the structuralist policies, structural reforms. So the cyclicality, the counter-cyclical fiscal policy, counter-cyclical monetary policy, that doesn't work. So that revelation is there. So your question, that answer to your question is yes and no. Yes, we are getting some recovery, but that recovery is highly uneven. Yeah.
Okay. And also recently you told about this political will. So do you think political will is capable of bringing in institutional and individual veracity to prevent gender-based violence against women, which is more of a social chaos to solve and help their financial empowerment?
Oh, wonderful. Violence against women. I can recall that instance happened in the public road, in the public transport. Girl was brutally murdered in 2010 or 11 December. So there you can ask me a question that the girl was not careful. She went out with her boyfriend after sunset. I'm not talking about the dress she's wearing. So these are the kind of debates happening the moment the violence against women or a girl is brutally murdered. But that's incorrect because what she has done is normal.
Yes.
Going out with her friend, going for Life of Pi movie because her study leave will begin. She has exams. Before that, it was completely normal. So what was the public policy response to that? The country was supposed to perform then. That time, the administrative, I remember Justice Verma Committee recommendations. So in 30 days time, they produced a committee report, and in that Justice Verma Committee recommendations, the starting point is just like the way you mentioned about that acceptance that it is a public policy failure. So that acceptance is very crucial. Now when something happens, the moment we get into a debate in parliament or among academicians, that acceptance that it's a public policy failure, that's not quite strong because that's a starting point, because we are trying to find out whether it is an intersectionality question, why we are not responding when something else happened. This is happening in this state. It's a kind of a comparison or a competition. No, the acceptance that it is a public policy failure is very crucial to act. Then the rest of the things come. And now the question comes to domestic violence. What's the role of state in domestic violence? A girl recently, she committed suicide, I remember, in her in-laws' place. And, it's sad because the kind of experience she must have undergone in that house, she may be looking for, where she can go if she's moving out of that toxic environment. So there is a role of state to provide even a short stay home or a support, because when the state machinery supports a woman, the domestic violence or the violence against women reduces. And studies shows, gender budgeting and domestic violence, that is inversely related. There's a study by University of California. Empirically, they have examined across states of India, And the states in which the gender budgeting was rolled out, the domestic violence against women, that data they have checked, and there is an inverse relationship. The higher the state machinery supports a woman, lower will be the violence against women. So there is a clear role of state. It is empirically based or evidence based. So we need to take up those kind of policies for social justice using the gender budgeting framework. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Last week you were there in our campus. So on the occasion of that International Summit Industry 4.0, I happened to visit, to listen your lecture. On the occasion, you made an interesting statement that if you place women in the top of any sort of financial institutions,
Yes.
they tend to keep the interest rate on high. So what made you think so?
Oh yes, that was a context-specific comment. I remember that there is a study, that is also empirically, in that study, this is called carrier theories. Like interest rate determination, we look into many economic models, but carrier theories are also very crucial to look into. Carrier theories in the sense, the personal characteristics of a prime minister, does that affect the economic growth process? These are the new kinds of research, And another question, the personal characteristics of a finance minister, does it affect your quality of deficit, the way he's going through the fiscal consolidation? So if it's a heterodox school trained, economist is like Isaac, then he may not do expenditure compression. He may focus on tax buoyancy. So these are like the questions which we can try. Then the way you ask me about the central bank governor, she or he, if it is a she, woman, they tend to keep the interest rate higher because, interest rate determination that happens in our country based on that rules-based monetary policy formula, right? Like Taylor rule, I may not call it, but it is like pegging your interest rate based on an inflation anchor, inflationary expectations and output gap. So if the output gap is narrow, the potential output and actual output, if that is narrow, that's not of a concern, then women in central banks, they tend to keep the interest rate higher. Because if the interest rate is higher, it affects the growth outcomes because you need interest rate to be lower for growth outcome because, then the credit will be cheaper, loans will be cheaper, then investment will happen and the growth recovery happen. But the moment you pull it up, then you're tackling with the inflation containment because high interest financialization of savings because we should not get into negative interest rates. Negative interest rate means the real rate of interest is nominal interest rate minus inflation. And in our country, the nominal interest rate, it's around 4 to 5. The inflation is mounting above the comfort zone, which is 6%. Like, as I mentioned, officially allowed inflation is 4 plus or minus 2, so 6. So it's mounting above the comfort zone. So we are getting into negative interest rate. So to prevent all those things, it affects financialization of savings. So, women, they are hawkish. They think that high interest rate, provided the output gap is minimized. But otherwise, there is a confusion in theory as well, like whether they focus on output or whether they focus on the inflation containment. And that's a dilemma for any RBI, any central bank chair or RBI governor. So this is a dilemma. So we are now into a kind of withdrawal of accommodation phase, but we have not got into a neutral stance in monetary policy. Yeah.
Ma'am, you have worked in India as well as in many parts of the world. And it is interesting to note that even in our country, RBI didn't have any women governor till now.
Yeah.
And so to ask, is there someone that you would suggest if you had a power to choose the RBI governor and you choose a woman, then who would you choose?
Many favorite economists I have, and if I announce the name, you're going to put it in YouTube. So it will make my life very tough. I have a few names in my mind. Women economists, they are doing really well. But now, what kind of independence you seek in RBI? The independence we seek in RBI is operational independence. So instead of RBI governor, who is having all power and announcing the decisions, now we have a monetary policy committee. So this monetary policy committee is, they have the voting power and they are announcing it. And in that monetary policy committee, I have good news for you, Ashish. You also know that there are many women on board, right? Ashima Goel, she's a very good economist and she's a part of MPC. So yeah, we have names. Hope it will become better. We will soon have a woman, an economist, at the top of our centre bank or the monetary policy realm. But I will not name because all are my friends and my seniors. I adore them, and a couple of names coming to my mind. But we have very powerful, knowledgeable, technically sound. They can deal with the political economy. So there are many women economists like that. If they get the power or the decision making, that authority, they will do really well. We have. And off word I can tell you. Yeah.
Ma'am, at the time you got into studying into economics and this present time, do you think women in economics has increased, or the participation of women in studying economics as a career option increased? Or do you think still there is something that prevents women from entering into economics as a career? Do you think something is there?
Yes, there are problems. It's not only in our small state Kerala, it's global. And recently I listened to the conversation between Janet Yellen, now the Treasury Secretary. She was the Fed chair, Janet Yellen, and she's the wife of Akerlof, our Nobel laureate, market for lemons, okay? So she also has gone through many ups and downs in the career, and she was not getting tenure in Harvard. When later on she became, that triple win. She became the RBI governor. The Fed chair. She became the Treasury Secretary, like our finance minister. So she's doing very well. And the Kristalina our IMF managing director, Kristalina was asking her or taking her interview. And their conversation was so beautiful. This question Ashish raised, that question was the first question they tried to grapple with. What is the solution for this? Then Janet Yellen mentioned that women, girls, youngsters, when they come and attend the class, there is nothing in the economics which they can connect to the real life, to the reality. So they are unable to connect. But later on, when we become policy makers, later on when we try to understand about economics, then we will find it out ourselves. But in the beginning, when it starts with technical things like micro, your demand, supply, ad hoc configuration of demand, supply, that decides everything. So that grilling, of the mind, women are unable to connect to. Then little bit of max here and there comes. And I'm not telling women are not good in max, because earlier there was a revolution happened from North America, because Barbie doll spoke that it is tough for Barbie, max is tough for Barbie. So that statement created a lot of issues. Like, it's giving a sense that women are not good in mathematics. So there was a revolution. No, with the engineer, economist, everybody, they responded to it. That you cannot speak. The Barbie cannot speak like Max. It's tough for Barbie. You cannot speak like that. So these are the challenges, to connect to the real world. But later on, we enjoy the women, and this is a case with the STEM subjects also. The women are not coming the science, but there should be a hand-holding. Mentoring process is very crucial. Peer group learnings are very crucial. So when we take up little bit of institutional reforms, we can mold, both women and men better, young girls and boys better. Yeah, but that initial apprehension may be the reason, or the unable to connect to the real economics, the business of life. Maybe these are the reasons which they are taken aback. But in career, women, in the American Economic Association conference, I attended in Atlanta to present my paper. So in 2019, there was a panel on women in economics, the question you are interested in. And in that panel, Janet Yellen was also there. And they openly confessed that many women economists in the beginning of their career, they didn't choose a topic related to gender for their work because they feared double discrimination, because they are all women. they're working on gender. So in that way, my story, of course, gender budgeting, and it was my career, it was my first project. So how it tackled, if you ask me, there are ups and downs in the journey, but recognition comes later that acceptance was a problem. But women, these are the they fear, because if you work about inflation, interest rate determination, deficits, you get accommodation with the brilliant minds. But if you talk about gender, will I get recognition? So these kind of apprehension needs to go. So these are the constraints actually. Yeah.
Okay, now coming to another question, that we know that recently freebies became a trendy topic in the media, with a lot of newspapers along with like medias all reported about it, and controversy do exist regarding that. So a few months back itself, that the chief of the 15th Finance Commission, that is Mr. N.K. Singh, commented on freebies as a quick path to fiscal disaster in his address. So when we consider about the Sri Lankan exercise, also we know that cutting down the corporate taxes, which was one among the promises that the government made during the election, was a major reason behind the collapse of the economy. So my question is that, would India go the Sri Lankan way if the freebie culture persists, and what are the lessons from the ongoing crisis?
Okay, toughest question. I know that you guys must have consulted with each other for this question. It's tough in the sense, two parts to this question.
Yes.
One is comparing our economy to
Sri Lanka.
Second is about freebie. So let me start with Sri Lankan economy. What happened in Sri Lanka is the deficit financing, if you look into, the external debt component was very high in Sri Lanka. In India, the financing of deficit is mostly internal. Our external debt is negligible, maybe less than 1% or something. It's very negligible. So within the internal dynamics, whether printing money to finance deficit, or you go ahead with the bond financing of deficit. So it's predominantly bond financing of deficit. So we will not get into that external debt kind of conditionalism, China, those kind of external fear we need not have. So that's one thing. Second, the use of fiscal space in Sri Lanka, freebies and the populist measures, you incentivize, the consent of the voters, because that calculus of consent, you buy voters, or you buy votes by giving freebies. So that was quite a matter of concern, the way you buy. But that is the privateness of a public spending. So to understand this privateness of the public spending and the freebies, that is an eclectic term, or it's an elite term, and I couldn't find this word freebies in any kind of a standard textbook. It's a kind of debate, recently generated, an eclectic term, because we don't know how to even define what is freebie. Providing bicycles for a girl to go to school, is that a freebie? Because it helps in her education. Is it a freebie? Yeah. And corporate tax cut, we say that that's to incentivize investment, and that is an incentive. So why one is incentive, other is freebie? So there is the way we use that freebies is also not homogeneous. There are many issues with that, but fundamentally we have to begin this research from the role of state. What is the role of state? The state has to provide public goods, and the public goods is basically non-rival and non-excludable in nature. So what are the goods in which we need to provide, which are non-rival and non-excludable? That's the role of state. Then the state entered into merit goods, because we need to look into externalities. If the social cost or the social benefits is higher than the private benefits, we go for it. So the externalities which we need to look into. So this freebies needs to be studied very thoroughly, using that state versus market, the functioning of the state and the markets in that debate. But what is happening right now is very ad hoc. It's a clientele-based expenses. Clientele-based expenses means we are trying to make the voters attractive and to give us vote, give us their mandate and take them back to the power. What are the kind of those kind of spending? we are, going ahead with that. Those kind of things, we need to be aware of our fiscal space for that. And if the fiscal space is not there, Delhi government could do it because they have the fiscal space. So if you don't have the fiscal space, if you promise many things, these are not productive in nature, that will put you in trouble. So in this question, the relevant is fiscal space. So you need to be aware of your fiscal space before you design the freebies. But free education, free health, I don't feel that's a freebie. That's very essential. And a women traveling in metro, free. I don't know whether it's freebie or whether it's supporting our mobility. So we need to have a thorough debate on what exactly is the definition of freebie before we getting and taking sides about this. So what exactly you call as a freebie? As you mentioned, corporate tax reduction, that tax incidence, whether we can call it as a freebie or it is freebie. If this is freebie, that is freebie, isn't it? So why you are not calling that as a freebie? So there is it's an eclectic in nature. So that definition itself needs to be, cleansed before we getting into the thorough debates. Because now I don't know where the country is moving regarding this freebie debate, and it's unfortunate in the sense the fiscal autonomy of a government. We need to respect that. How you design programs for your state, that autonomy needs to be given to the state. In the cooperative federalism, in the intergovernmental fiscal transfers and all, there are a lot of issues related to the transfer of funds, ad hocism over there. We are not talking about those kind of issues which is affecting the fiscal space, but we are worried about whether the freebies announced by different state governments is affecting the fiscal space. But fiscal space determination and what is constraining the fiscal space is elsewhere in the cooperative federalism model, not in freebies. So we need to rethink about that. Yeah.
So what are the lessons from Sri Lankan crisis?
Lessons. You should not have a sovereign bond or go for external bond financing of deficit, because there could be conditionalities, a lot of issues. So that needs to be minimized. And second, incentivizing the calculus of consent without looking into the fiscal space can put you in trouble. But that's a small island economy, but ours is a very diverse economy. So I don't think that even in a state government that kind of Sri Lankan crisis is going to happen because of our high deficit and high debt. No, that's not going to happen like that. Because high debt is a reality, but we are using it for capital infrastructure. And the capital infrastructure crowds in and it helps in the growth recovery process. So it's productive in nature. So if you can substantiate the high debt to reduce the output gaps and to enhance the capital investment or infrastructure, then you can live with a little bit of debt. It's not going to be exhaustive or explode. And another thing is RMG, rate of interest, real rate of interest, and the real growth of economy. And you need to look into these two parameters. If R is greater than G, you are in trouble. That means the real rate of interest, that means the cost of credit is greater than the growth of economy. That means you are not growing out of your debt. Your cost of credit is higher. The economy is not growing in that manner. But if you can grow out of it, if your R is not greater than G, then debt is sustainable. So that's the way we look into the parameters. So there is no crisis I can see, just like the way it happened in Sri Lanka. Yeah.
To conclude, ma'am, what's your message to the young and the economic students, especially to the women group? What's your message to them, ma'am?
Okay, good question. I have not reached to a point in which I can give, but I can share my experiences like to both girls and boys. The unit of analysis of your performance should be every day. Without doing anything, don't sleep. Little bit, you build your world, like reading or writing or studying. So little by little, you move things. Because if you do that every day, the unit of analysis of your performance is every day, then after 2 months, 3 months, you can see in front of your eyes that things moved. That gives you confidence. So that's the way it is. Like every day you have to perform. Perform in the sense, little bit, that's the message. Then second, about the mental health, because there is nobody to tell us how to tackle the mental health. A girl may be performing, she may be a topper, but what the distance she's traveling to reach there, or what's a kind of, because you are into that 20s, and I also have the hangover of 20s. I still live in the hangover of 20s. So I can understand that what you tackle within yourself to perform. So those mental health issues, when you think, don't look for, a mentor will come and handhold me. And life should not be a search for a mentor in front of you. When you take the first step, 10 or 15 people will be there to take you to the next level. So that initial step, that initiative needs to come from you. So you should not lie in bed for some time that nothing is happening to me, sunrise and sunset, and you feel that no, somebody has to comment, I need a hand holding, I need a mentor. No, that's a mirage. That's you will not get. But if you get up, let it not turn a blue tick, my friend is not responding, okay, that's fine for me, but I will get up. That's self-initiative to move ahead. When you take the first step, there will be many hands to handhold you and many people to support you. So that initiative. So these are the two quick messages I thought, and believe that economics, it's a business of life. You can connect to people in economics. It's not a very dry subject or anything. You can help people. Ultimately, if you want to connect to the people beyond the technicalities, you will be able to do that in the field of economics. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. We had a wonderful session talking to you. It was really good. And so thank you so much for spending your valuable time with us and coming to this your own campus again.
Absolutely, it's homecoming, and thanks Mariam and Ashish for this brilliant questions. And I never thought that we are doing an official interview or anything. I really enjoyed the conversation with both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am.